Officer Larson, do you recognize State's Exhibit 1?
Yeah, this is the front door of the victim, John Miller's house.
And can you tell the jury about the condition of the door and how it occurred that way?
Well, this is the front door jamb that had been split open as a result of the defendant kicking the door open.
And do you recognize State's Exhibit 2?
Yeah, this is the lock that's on the door, and as the photo shows, is the defendant's footprint.
And State's Exhibit 3 and 4. Do you recognize these two photographs?
These are photographs that were taken at that little general store where the defendant's van was found, and these are pictures of the interior of the van.
Whose items are these?
These are Mr. Miller's items, the stereo components that were stolen from his home.
And how did they get to that position in the van?
The defendant drove the van to that store.
Okay, thank you very much. Your Honor, I'd like to move these photographs into evidence.
Any objection?
Your Honor.
Sorry? Yes.
The TV set number 3 is not for Mr. Miller's
We're showing the photograph of the two cassette recorders and the rifle that was stolen. Here's the photograph, page 41.
I want to make this statement.
I'll allow you to cross-examine him. Any other objections?
Anything else, Your Honor?
All right. Objection will be overruled. It'll be admitted as State's Composite Exhibit 1.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Larson, was anything else found in the van on that day?
Yes, there was a jacket of the defendant, and we found 2 pieces of identification of Alan Mark in that jacket. Also, there was a TV set that was the subject of another burglary.
Speculation. Captain Larson doesn't know at the time of the found where the TV set came from. So it really doesn't have anything to do with what we're trying to discover.
Any other grounds? I'll sustain the objection.
Was there anything else found in the van besides those?
There was also a bottle of beer, which we checked for prints, and our print people.
The defense is willing to stipulate that my client Alan Mark is the owner of the van. That's the line of questioning counsel trying to get to.
Your Honor, the officer's just testifying to what was found in the van. I don't understand what the objection is.
The objection is, where are you going with this? We'll admit that my client owns the van. We never want to say he did.
What's the objection as to the question and the answer?
He's going to use the 8-pound fingerprints of my client. Sure. The car, it's his van. It's registered to him. He's the owner.
Overruled on those grounds.
Please continue.
Again, we found a bottle of beer in the car, and we sent it to our print people, and it came back that the prints on the bottle of beer were similar to those of the defendant.
What did you do with all this evidence that was found in the van?
Stored it in our evidence lockers at the police station.
And why did you do this?
To preserve them for trial.
Okay, and then what occurred after checking all the evidence into the evidence room at the police station?
Well, we showed some photographs to the officers who had chased the defendant to the Little General, and they identified the defendant, Alan Marr, as well as Dale Alton.
1 minute, counsel.
Were there any other photo identifications?
Yes, the next day we had we brought the victim down, Mr. Miller, and showed him a photo ID of about 20 photos. There he picked out Mr. Alton as well as the defendant's brother, who looks very similar to the defendant.
In your opinion, is it reasonable that someone might choose the wrong person in that situation?
Yes, it is.
And why is that?
Well, we show photos that are so substantially similar to one another that where you have brothers, it's likely that that could occur.
And did Richard Miller identify the defendant at another time?
Yes, later at a preliminary hearing, the victim.
Objection, Your Honor.
Grounds.
Speculation, Captain Larson was never at the preliminary hearing, because nobody included his life.
I believe Captain Larson was in the preliminary hearing at that point.
All right. 67. Page 67.
Eight design lines down, time to disclose the registration, unless she was there.
Your Honor, I'll move on.
I'll sustain the objection. Last question, counsel.
Did you do anything else on that day, Officer Larson?
Yes, also, you all from the State Attorney's Office had asked me to conduct a test drive from the victim's home to the Little General store to help corroborate the victim's story.
And what was your finding?
That it took 12 minutes to get from the victim's home to the Little General store.
And one final question, please tell the jury what that means in relation to the time of the crime.
That it would have taken the defendant 12 minutes to get from, at least 12 minutes to get from the victim's home to that Little General store.
Okay, no further questions.
All right. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Captain Larson.
Just give me 1 minute, please.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Steve Shotwell, Mr. Alton, how are you today?
Good.
Please say your name for the court.
Dale Alton.
Mr. Alton, where do you live?
Well, right now I'm in prison.
And you are here now. What is your relationship with the defendant here today?
Well, he's a good friend of mine.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like, I'll be asking some more questions. I would like to, under Federal Rule of Evidence 611C, be allowed to ask some leading questions due to the fact that the witness here is a witness and he's identified with the adverse party.
Defense.
The witness has not shown himself yet to be hostile, Your Honor, but we ask that he be given the opportunity to testify first and then report to the full judgment or submission.
I don't believe that's it.
Yes, I'm going to reserve until we begin the examination. I'll decide at that point. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Alton, do you remember March 28th of this past year?
Yes, I remember March 28th.
And what, if anything, happened on that day?
Well, a lot of stuff happened. I robbed the house.
And you robbed that house. When you robbed that house, when you robbed that house, how did you get to that house?
In a van.
And did you go into in that van by yourself?
No.
And would you describe for the court the person who was in that van with you?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like once again, under Rule 611C, the witness is not answering the questions that I'm directed to him. So I'd like the opportunity to lead the witness a little bit more.
I'll let you lead in that particular area at this point. Limited to that area for now.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You know what area I'm speaking of?
About the driver of the car?
Yes.
Can I have one moment, Your Honor? Thank you, Your Honor. After you committed this burglary, what, if anything, happened?
Well, I rode out to, that was a long time ago. I'm not really sure I remember everything that happened.
Once again, Your Honor, I'd like the opportunity to lead the witness in this.
Proceed, yes.
After you had burglarized the home, you got in the van, you said with another person.
Yes.
Where did you and that other person drive to?
We drove to the Tempo restaurant.
And then after that, where did you go?
The little general store.
And while you were at the little general store, were you there with the same person who you burglarized the house with?
No.
You're with a different person.
Yes.
When you left the little general store, some police officers arrived, and you
We ran.
You and who ran?
A person.
Another person.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember on May 8th, there was a hearing where you pled guilty to this burglary?
Yes, I remember that.
And during that hearing, a question was asked to you. Now, was the person who ran from the vehicle, that van, the same person who was at the house with you? And you answered, yes, it was. The next question, are you telling me today that the person was Alan Mark or someone else? You answered, I'm telling you it was someone else. You remember that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And the following question after that was the person at the house who committed the burglary with you the same person who ran from the van? And you said, yes. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Now, do you remember a short time after, Detective Larson, Captain Larson, came to visit you at the penitentiary?
Well, he came to visit me a bunch of times. I mean,
He came to you on June 19th, and during this day, and on this day, he spoke to you about the burglary. Do you remember that?
not really. I don't remember what we talked about or anything like that.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
No, you can simply impeach him right there.
On June 19th, when Captain Larson came and spoke to you, do you remember telling Captain Larson, on the day of the offense, I'm sorry, page 17, Counsel. Do you remember telling Captain Larson, the person who ran from the little general store was Alan Mark?
Telling the cop.
The cop, that's correct.
Yeah, I did tell him that.
You did tell him that.
Yeah.
Now, and also earlier, then going back to the statement from your hearing, you said that the person was someone else.
Well, yeah, I said that then, but I remembered it differently when I was telling the cop. I remember that. It was Alan that was with me running from the general store. So I picked him up at at his restaurant.
He can explain.
Okay.
Counsel, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. have nothing further right now, Your Honor.
All right. Certainly.
Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Dr. James Pierce.
Your Honor, I was out for him, and we can't go over as an expert, correct?
Can you go over whatever you like? I'm saying at the time.
Okay, I was outside.
It's been certified as an expert for the rest of the law.
Doctor, during the month of December of last year, were you employed?
Yes, I was.
And with whom?
With the Needed City Coroner's Department or office.
Do you recall during that month doing any autopsies?
Yes, I do. I probably did 6 or 7 of them that month.
Do you remember on December 1st doing an autopsy on a Trudy Doyle?
Yes, I
And how long did that autopsy last?
do. If memory serves me right, probably 3 hours
And where was that autopsy performed?
in our office at the coroner's office.
Now, doctor, at this time, I would like to show you the diagram marked Exhibit 3 for purpose of identification. Could you please tell me what that is?
This is a diagram reconstructing the entry, exit wound, and exit wounds that the decedent suffered on that day.
And where's this diagram from?
This would be an amendment to the autopsy report.
And I ask, is this a true and correct representation of the drawing done by yourself?
Yes,
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to offer this as Exhibit 3 and let the record reflect that I'm showing this to defense counsel.
Any objection by the defense?
Your Honor, at this time, I also ask the court's permission to use the overhead projector with the same exhibit. Thank you. Based on the diagram shown and the autopsy you performed, and you are an expert.
yes.
Within reason, in your best expert opinion, can you tell us what happened to Trudy Doyle? And Your Honor, I just want to ask witnesses to sit down and refer to the diagram.
This Doyle was shot twice, as you can see here in the interior view, the front view. The first shot being shot number 3, which is diagrammed here, and also here at the lateral view, which is at the lesser of the 2 angles. This shot would have obviously forced Miss Doyle's body backwards, as the gun used is the Mauser 9mm. Throwing Miss Doyle back, the second shot number 4, and also here, entered Miss Doyle's body at a greater angle. These bullets, in conjunction, bullet number 4 was the cause of death in Miss Doyle's case, severing her aorta, causing massive internal hemorrhaging.
Doctor, in your opinion, are you able to tell in what direction the bullets entered Ms. Doyle's body?
Yes, if you look at the lateral diagram, bullet number 4 with entry wound number 5 was the first bullet to hit Ms. Doyle, and you could see the angle of entry here, and then bullet number 3 followed at a much less steeper angle.
Okay, Doctor, you can have it. Thank you. Now, Doctor, in your expert opinion, could a person such as Trudy Doyle have inflicted these wounds on herself?
No, at the autopsy, we conducted tests
done that day.
And you know that again because of the test?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You've been classified as an expert, so I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Are you receiving any money to testify today?
No, I'm not. Nothing over my normal fee as a...
During the month of December of last year, where were you employed?
I was at the deputy coroner's office, or the coroner's office in Nita City, the deputy coroner.
And do you recall what you were doing on the day of December 1st of that year?
Yes, I performed a postmortem examination of Ms. Trudy Doyle.
And about how long did that last?
It was several hours
And where was it done?
at the coroner's office in Nita City, Nita.
Could you describe her to us as she came to you?
Yes, her appearance, her clothes were rather bloodied, soaked all the way to her outer coat. It was obvious that she had received 2 bullet wounds to the chest and 1 bullet wound to the wrist. At an initial x-ray of Ms. Trudy Doyle's body, we found a foreign object lodged in her back, which was later found out to be a bullet.
And how tall was Trudy Doyle?
5'4" of average weight.
Your Honor, I'd like to mark these as State's Exhibit 1, 2, and 3 for identification. Let the record reflect that I'm showing these to opposing counsel. Your Honor, I approach the witness. Dr. Pierce, do you recognize these?
Yes. These are photographs of Miss Trudy Doyle's body.
And is State's Exhibit 1 a fair and accurate depiction of the body when you saw it at the pathologist's office?
Yes, this was a photograph of her body when she first came into the coroner's office.
And number 2, do you recognize State's Exhibit 2?
Yes, I do. That's the bullet that we removed from Miss Trudy Doyle's torso.
And is this a fair and accurate depiction of the exact bullet that was found?
Yes, it definitely seems to
And
be.
how do you know these 2 photographs are what they tend to be?
Because I took them myself.
Do you have any markings on these photographs to show that these are yours?
Yeah, here are my initials right there, JP, on the bullet, and I signed this photo down here at the bottom.
And do you recognize State's Exhibit number 3?
Yes, that is a diagram that I attached to my examination, signed by me at the bottom.
Your Honor, may I use the overhead projector to show the jury this transparency that he just said he recognized? Excuse me? Yes, I'd like to move all exhibits into evidence.
I object to the picture of the victim. I don't see the relevance of it, and it's inflammatory to the jury.
Your Honor, this picture is just to show that this medical examiner, Dr. Pierce, was the one who did this autopsy, as he recognized the woman, as he has his report, and as he's about to testify to the transparency.
So the relevancy of the picture is,
That he is the medical examiner that looked over this person.
can you stipulate to that?
How does that show that he's a medical examiner?
Well, let's assume that it is. Do you stipulate that he's the medical examiner?
Yes, Your Honor, please stipulate that he is a medical examiner.
Your Honor, we'll remove this from evidence. The State would like to introduce 2 and 3 into evidence.
Any objection on those?
No, Your Honor.
I'll be admitted State's Exhibits 1 and 2.
May I publish 2 to the jury while Dr. Pierce steps down to the projector? Dr. Pierce, please explain to the jury what this picture is.
Well, this is a diagram that I attached to my examination of Ms. Trudy Doyle, all views and an indication of the bullet wounds and the angles which they contribute to her body.
Can you please step to the screen and explain to us what the numbers 3, 4, and 5 represent?
Yes, 3 and 4 are the 2 entry wounds on Ms. Trudy Doyle's chest. 3, the bullet that went into 3 lodged in her back. At 5 was the exit wound for entrance at number 4. The angles in which the bullets entered into her body are depicted down here in the lateral view and the top view. Is seen here that the first one went into the right side, and then the second one came at an angle and exited. It is also evident that the first one stopped in the body and was slowed down when apparently it had gone through her right wrist. This is why this is typical of a bullet stopping in the body as opposed to another object.
Is the exit wound higher or lower than the entrance wound?
As you can see here from the lateral view, it's lower, and the point at which the bullet number 3 stopped was also lower than the entrance wound.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pierce. Based on your experience and upon this particular autopsy, why do you believe, what is your opinion, that the exit wound is below the entrance wound?
It's typical in these cases that the gun from which the bullet was fired was at a higher position, typically fired by a person taller than the victim.
And also, based on your experience and this particular autopsy, what was the cause of death?
The cause of death was from the 2 bullet wounds in the chest. She suffered a right hemothorax.
Were there any other wounds on the witness? Excuse me, on Trudy Doyle.
There were, in addition to the 2 bullet wounds on her chest, one apparently had gone through her wrist.
Which wrist was this?
This was her right wrist.
And was Trudy Doyle right-handed or left-handed?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, sidebar. I don't think the doctor has any knowledge of this testimony as to whether the victim was.
Your Honor, state will withdraw. No further questions.
Yes, sir. Your Honor, Doctor, you don't necessarily have to be legally drunk to be impaired by alcohol. Is that not true?
That's true, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I have a 3-question redirect.
Very briefly.
Dr. Pierce, is the blood alcohol level of .04 within the legal limit?
Yes, it is.
And secondly, why was the bullet at a downward angle?
Because it was fired from an individual who was taller than the victim.
And how tall was the victim?
5'4".
And did Trudy Doyle fire a gun on that day?
It's not really apparent from the examination that she fired that there were no powder burns.
Your Honor, he has no knowledge as to who fired the gun that day.
What was the question?
Did Trudy Doyle fire a gun that day? I believe Dr. Pierce is testifying that powder burns were not found on the deceased's hands. Were there any significant markings on Trudy Doyle that she fired the gun on that day?
Objection, Your Honor, there's nothing in the report that would lead us to believe that he has any knowledge as to whether she fired a gun or not.
There were no extraordinary markings such as powder
Objection,
burns.
Your Honor, it's outside the scope of direct.
What?
Of his direct testimony. His redirect has to stay within what he said on direct testimony.
Not exactly.
Well, his judgment, it has to have some relevance as to what was spoken of on direct.
Cross.
Your Honor, may I respond in a quick sentence?
No, that's a statement, Judge.
Nothing.